All right, today we are diving into one of the most important and honestly most complicated chapters in American history, Reconstruction. We're talking about that incredibly turbulent time right after the Civil War, a period that was just packed with hope but also so much disappointment. And, the big questions it raised about what freedom and equality really mean? We're still wrestling with those today. So here's the deal. To really get a handle on this whole era, from 1865 to 1877, you have to understand it all comes down to this one massive question. Yeah, the Civil War was over, but the fight for what America was actually going to be, that was just getting started. And look, this wasn't just about rebuilding buildings and bridges. No, this was about trying to redefine the very soul of the country. And at the very beginning, things looked incredibly promising. It really seemed like this new version of America was going to be built on a whole new foundation of freedom. At least that's what it looked like on paper. The changes being made were, well, nothing short of revolutionary.
Okay, first up, and this is the big one, the 13th Amendment gets passed. And let's be clear, this wasn't some temporary thing. This was it, a permanent constitutional end to slavery, forever. It completely changed the rulebook for the entire country.
Next, you get the 14th Amendment, and wow, this one is an absolute powerhouse. It did a couple of massive things. First, it said that if you're born in the United States, you're a citizen, period. That single sentence instantly granted citizenship to 4 million people who had just been freed from slavery. And second, it guaranteed every single citizen equal protection of the laws. And to round out this incredible trio, we have the 15th Amendment. This one tackled what is, one of the most basic rights in any democracy, the right to vote. It made it illegal to deny someone the vote because of their race, their color, or because they had been enslaved. The goal here was crystal clear, to give black men a voice in their own government. So think about that. In just 5 years, you have these 3 massive constitutional changes, the Reconstruction Amendments. Suddenly, the legal framework for a genuinely multiracial democracy is actually there. That journey from chains to the ballot box, it wasn't just a dream anymore. It was happening. For millions of people, freedom felt like it was finally, truly within reach. But, and this is a huge but, passing a law is one thing. Actually making it happen on the ground, that's a whole different ballgame. That unity that helped pass these amazing amendments, it just fell apart when it came to figuring out how to enforce them. The fight over what Reconstruction should actually look like, well, it got messy, fast. And this political battle really boiled down to 2 very different visions. On one side, you've got President Andrew Johnson. He's the guy who took over after Lincoln was killed. His plan? Go easy on the South. Let them back into the Union quickly. But on the other side were the radical Republicans in Congress, and they were like, no way! They believed a soft approach would just waste everything the war was fought for. They wanted to use the full power of the federal government to protect the rights of freed people. And these radical Republicans, they weren't just making speeches. They took real action. They set up something called the Freedmen's Bureau, which helped with essentials like food, housing, and schools. They passed the Civil Rights Act of 1866, and when even that wasn't enough to get the job done, they did something drastic. They basically put the South under military control to force compliance with these new laws. We're talking about protecting people's rights with the Army. But all of this federal power was met with an incredible amount of pushback from the South, and it was organized, it was widespread, and very often it was violent. The old power structure wasn't just going to roll over and accept this new reality. So how did they push back? Well, one of the first ways was through the law itself. Southern states started passing these things called black codes. And what were they? They were laws designed to control every aspect of black people's lives, their labor, their movement, everything. They put restrictions on what jobs they could have, where they could travel. Really, it was just an attempt to bring back slavery in everything but name. All right, so after the legal pushback, you get the economic pushback. A system called sharecropping started to pop up everywhere. Here's how it worked. A landowner would rent a family a piece of land to farm, and in return, he'd take a huge chunk of the crops they grew. The problem was, with super high costs and totally unfair contracts, families got stuck in this endless cycle of debt they could never ever pay off. It basically tied them to the land, which, if you think about it, sounds an awful lot like slavery all over again. And that brings us to the third, and frankly the most brutal tool of resistance, pure, raw violence. This is when white supremacist groups like the Ku Klux Klan came into being, and their goal was terrifyingly simple. Use terror, use intimidation, use murder, whatever it took to stop African Americans from using their newly won rights, especially the right to vote.
So you've got this constant, relentless resistance in the South. At the same time, the North is just getting tired. They were worn down by all the conflict, there was a big economic crisis happening, and that commitment to Reconstruction just started to fade away. The political will to keep troops in the South, to keep fighting to enforce these rights, it pretty much just evaporated.
And you can see exactly what happened next right here. In 1877, there's this backroom political deal, the federal troops are pulled out of the South, and just like that, Reconstruction is officially over. And what came next was tragic. It was a step-by-step destruction of all the rights that had been gained. This path leads directly to the rise of Jim Crow laws and a society built on legalized segregation.
Really, the final nail in the coffin came in 1896 with a Supreme Court case called Plessy v. Ferguson. This is where we get that infamous phrase, separate but equal. That single idea became the legal excuse for decades of racial segregation, justifying everything from separate schools to separate water fountains. But of course, as we all know, things were always separate, they were just never, ever equal.
So what's the bottom line here? Reconstruction was this incredibly bold, truly revolutionary attempt to remake America into a more just and equal nation. But the experiment failed. The amazing promise of those 3 amendments we talked about, it was broken. And all that progress that had been made was slowly, methodically rolled back for the next 100 years. In the end, what Reconstruction did was ask a really fundamental question. Can America actually live up to its own promises of freedom and justice for all its people? And the failure of Reconstruction didn't make that question disappear. Not at all. It's a question that generations of Americans have fought over, died for, and honestly, it's a question we're still trying to answer today.